For those of you who have been paying attention, because let's face it, you'd have to be living under a rock. Henry Kissinger made it to 100 years old before he kicked the bucket. Now, here's a man who is a legitimate mass murderer. And he isn't just any mass murderer. This is a guy who is as directly responsible for the complete and utter decimation of Southeast Asia.
We're talking 3 to 4 million people.
And that's not even counting the people who suffered mightily from Agent Orange for many years after the fact, may not have died in the bombings.
3 to 4 million people.
But between northern Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, especially Cambodia,
oh my God,
this man has literally destroyed not just millions of lives, but economies. Like, he is again, if there's a ninth circle of hell, he's floating there. But here's the thing. That man was given the Nobel Peace Prize 50 years ago. That award became irrelevant.
But it never
was.
See, and that was the first sign that I think that started losing its meaning. You know, I mean, it was sort of, Obama was the final nail in the coffin, I think, but it had already sort of lost its meaning when you give it to someone like Henry Kissinger.
And that's not the end of it. We're going to play a clip now basically highlighting all the things that people had to say about this man kicking the bucket. And we'll further comment because there's a couple of other layers to the story that, as should one be expecting, has not been covered in the media. What a surprise.
In 1973, the largest transfer. The largest transfer. The largest transfer. The largest transfer. Of weapons sent. Of weapons sent. From the United States to Israel. From the United States to Israel. Happened under the watch. Happened under the watch. Of Henry Kissinger. Of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger. Is one of the most ardent Zionists. Is one of the most ardent Zionists. In U.S. history. In U.S. history. And he just died. And he just died.
Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died. That's according to his consulting firm, Kissinger Associates. He was 100 years old. A statement says that he passed away at his home today in Connecticut. Kissinger, of course, was Secretary of State under Presidents Nixon and Ford, the only person to ever serve as the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State at the same time. More now on his legacy.
I know all of you will want to hear from the new Secretary of State.
Henry Kissinger never really needed an introduction on the world stage again. Kissinger, the most famous statesman of the last half of the 20th century. Celebrated and controversial.
I'm not going to make it.
Nixon and an undiplomatic Kissinger thought more bombing of the North would help.
I would then recommend that you start bombing the retreaters out of them within 48 hours.
Kissinger approved secret bombings of North Vietnamese units in Cambodia without congressional approval. He would say sometimes statesmen have to choose among evils.
Under Nixon, Kissinger oversaw the massacre of millions in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos from 1969 to 1973. He was the mastermind behind the carpet bombing of Cambodia, which deliberately targeted civilians, personally approving all 3,875 bombing raids in Cambodia. And to this day, Laos remains the most bombed country in world history. Kissinger aided the Pakistani dictator Yahya Khan against Bangladesh's liberation war of 1971, enabling the mass slaughter of an estimated 300,000 to 3 million people.
We act as if we are trying to force the Serbs back into a mythical Bosnia that has never existed in history. There's no Bosnian language, there's no Bosnian culture. Bosnia is an administrative entity which contains Croats, Muslims, and Serbs, artificially created as a subdivision of Yugoslavia and foolishly recognized as a state by the Western powers in 1991.
It was a grave mistake to let in so many people of totally different cultural and religious and concepts.
He just couldn't die.
Oh my God.
He eventually just had to crawl into a cocoon and disappear.
Oh, he's
like
horrible.
that's kind of what happened.
He's just horrible.
I passed an article on to Jen last night that talked about how Henry Kissinger had stood in the way, probably more than anyone else, of a one-state democratic solution between the Israelis and Palestinians in Palestine, not Israel, Palestine, as it's referred. This article was written in 1989. So it just goes to show you that he's been at it for a very long time. Now, I'm not saying that the issue in Israel-Palestine is now all of a sudden going to go away, but it is pretty clear that this man, who was DC royalty for literally half a century, he got his Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. Vietnam War ends shortly thereafter. And this man was the envy of both major political parties, in particular of George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton.
He's extremely popular. I remember a point when I was growing up, like had he been born in this country, he would have definitely could have been elected president. Like he is somebody, oh, for sure. But I mean, that's just, I remember as a kid how popular he was. And it's just horrifying. And
here's a guy, you know, he was the first Jewish Secretary of State, but it always seems to be these very, like, as we often talk about, bad representations of a specific culture and where a lot of that anti-Semitism stems from. Well, if the likes of Henry Kissinger is who we're looking at as the representation of Jews in politics, that is the worst kind. And this is a man who never apologized, ever, completely content with what he did, and didn't think they did enough.
I feel like there's been this very long line of psychopathic secretaries of state that are just completely unapologetically, brazenly warmongers. There's no statesman like what, think about who have been our more recent secretary of state, like these.
Well,
these
the current
people,
secretary of state, in my opinion, is the president. He's calling the shots.
Well, certainly with everything that's foreign affairs.
No, absolutely.
But I mean, I'm seriously, it's like people like Hillary Clinton, people like Madeleine Albright, people like Henry Kissinger. These are psychopathic, like real bloodthirsty individuals. And that to me is very telling that because the Secretary of State isn't the Secretary of Defense, isn't the head of the Joint Chiefs, isn't the person who is in charge of military. The Secretary of State isn't somebody that is supposed to necessarily be a militant position. And yet I feel like we have some of the most bloodthirsty people in that position.
Oh, we do.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.